future. The Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, DCDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the session on legal policy and regulatory frameworks. My name is Manal Ismail. I'm Chief Expert Internet Policies at the National Telecom Regulatory Authority of Egypt and moderator of this session. The wide use of the Internet, the emergence of new technologies, the need for national plans and strategies for digital transformation and digital inclusion have all prompted governments, politicians, and regulators to set regulatory frameworks in order to face challenges of digitization. This includes securing digital sovereignty, ensuring safety, security, and resiliency of critical infrastructure, and having control over their own nation's future, digital future. All of which are very good reasons, no doubt, yet on the other hand, such regulatory frameworks may endanger the single, unified, borderless, and interoperable internet we know, and risk balkanization and fragmentation of it. So over the coming 70 minutes, we will attempt to shed some light on issues pertaining to legal environments and regulatory policies and frameworks, exploring whether there is necessity for such regulatory frameworks, what may be their scope, impact, and extraterritorial effects, explore the need for collaboration in that respect, and see whether there are non-regulatory alternatives that should be explored. I'm honored to be accompanied by 5 distinguished experts who will be providing diverse views representing different stakeholder groups and different national experiences. So without any further ado, allow me to hand over the floor to our speakers for 5 minutes introductory remarks each, and we will be doing a couple of more iterations, so you don't have to cover everything in the first slot. And I would like to start by His Excellency Bilal Al-Hafnawi, Commissioner and Board Member at the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Jordan. Mr. Bilal has more than 19 years of experience in technology, telecommunications, information technology, and digital transformation. And in addition to serving as a commissioner and board member at the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Jordan, he also worked with several international mobile vendors and operators. Mr. Bilal, you have a dual experience in both private and public sectors. So wearing your private sector hat on, can you please share with us a private sector perspective on cross-sectorial collaboration and cooperative regulatory frameworks? Also noting that you can speak in Arabic, English, or French. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manal, for giving me this opportunity to speak about corporate regulatory frameworks I'm talking today about private sector perspective toward investment and how to cooperate with government. I would like to start to mention that during the last recent years, rapid technological progresses and the growth had happened. So world is passing through different phases of digitalization, then digital transformation, which generated tremendous benefits for customers and citizens. So we are talking here about how to serve customers and how to serve citizens in a better way. Statista company mentioned in their report of January 21 that there are 4.66 billion active internet users worldwide, which represents 60% of the global population. Out of this population, there's 92.6% accessing the internet via mobile devices. So we have a huge need for mobile devices and mobile coverage in parallel with moving with technology. So the mobile revolution is rapidly bringing connectivity to everyone in remote areas, in cities and in rurals and in suburbs. At the same time, the prices for digital services are falling rapidly down. So there are three key characteristics of digital ecosystem that are responsible for this progress: the modularity and the economics of scale and scope, and the dynamism. That we need to think about modularity, that digital products and services are made up of complementary inputs, that we need to think about applications, communications, content, and devices in order to work together in different combinations to produce value and to give customer the value of the service. At the same time, we need to think about economics of scale and scope. We need to think about network effects. We need to think about improved products and services that is made available to customers. The third point that we need to think about digital markets and dynamic. We need to have business continuity and the new services for new and existing companies that have powerful incentives to invest and innovate. So we need to think here about how to get the best of private sector serving the public and the public sector and citizens. There's a growing innovation and rapid entry of new competitors in digital ecosystem markets, which affected the cost and the service. And this caused regulatory distortion in some cases. So regulations can help to safeguard and protect people, information, and infrastructure. So we can here to think about regulation to protect the service and protect the people and protect the information and protect the infrastructure. And regulation here can foster the environment and encourage sustainable return on investment. So we need to think about infrastructure investment that it could be returned back to the investor. And the ICT sector is moving and working together with different sectors, that we need to have regulatory approaches collaborative between different sectors for the success of the investment. We don't need to ignore that cyber threats are growing in the scope and in the scale, and we need to think about to protect mobile subscribers and users of the internet in general. And many countries now are expanding the scope of digital regulatory to include frameworks of digital transformation and regulating different services that could appear. And at the same time, the collaboration among different regulators of ICT and other regulators should be increasing, that we need to have cooperation between the telco regulators and investment regulators and other regulators that serving the business type. Why we need to think about this? That because we have new digital economy technologies that like artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, IoT, and social media that are putting together paradigms to the regulatory framework. And we need to test that regulatory is familiar and ready to regulate these new emerging technologies. So national regulators are faced with the new technologies and new business models and investment models. So we need to think about this point. The point here that one regulatory model is hardly fits all, that we need to make divergence for regulatory framework in a complex, fast-moving environment, that we need to encourage investment and innovation. And at the same time, the telecom regulator should work in parallel with the competition authority or investment authority to attract the business and attract the investment that could work together to grow the country and improve infrastructure. Here we need to think about that digital technologies are not serving only technology sectors. They are now working beyond or serving sectors beyond the technology. We are thinking about agriculture, banking, education, e-government, and e-health, and intelligent transport, and the smart water management systems. So all of these systems are working together, and here we need to think about regulation that match all, that can attract investment in all sectors, not only in technology sector. We don't need to ignore that. We need to think about privacy and data protection, which is as a part of the digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution, that we need to think about ability to store and transmit and use information, which is the source of economy and social value that's created by the digital system. And at the same time, we need to think about concerned consumers, that they need to be sure that their information is protected and it's not used in an improper way. And in many countries, these concerns are these concerns are managed by the regulators to put the, different regulation regimes that protect the consumer data, like GDPR rules in Europe, that need to protect the data and the privacy for the users, and to facilitate communication between countries and between different organizations. I don't need to take more time, just I need to summarize here that the dynamic efficiency feedback loop for private sector benefiting from the cooperative regulatory frameworks, it needs 4 parts. That we need to start with the user demand, how to satisfy the user demands, either citizen or mobile user or internet user. And we need to think about business plan profitability for the private sector mentality in order to work in corporate with the government. And we need to think about how to start investment and innovation, and how to encourage that investment. And which is in the result, as a 4th point, we need to provide coverage and multi-services and the proper investment affordability and the proper ROI to have a win-win deal with government. So by this way, the both operators or both investors and government are working in parallel. As a conclusion for this point, that cooperative regulatory frameworks here facilitate the private sector investment and to protect the investment, and at the same time encourage users to use the upcoming digital services. And these services will be extended to all sectors, not only technical sectors, but agriculture and education and health sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bilal. Very important messages on how private sector can cooperate with governments to better serve the customer, also on infrastructure investment and collaboration between the different sectors. I would like to give the floor next to Mr. Shawki Shihi, Director General at the Ministry of Communication Technologies in Tunis. Mr. Shawki began his professional career with the Ministry of Vocational Training and Employment in Tunis and has more than 15 years of experience in design, development of applications and management of information systems. He has been appointed Director of the Project for Digital Transformation of User-Oriented Public Services and is in charge of communication technologies at the Ministry of Communication Technologies in Tunis. Mr. Shawki, appreciate if you can talk to us about digital strategies. What's a digital strategy? Why is it important to governments, and any best practices from Tunis? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Manel. I would like to say that if it is possible, I will make my intervention in French. En fait, la technologie d'aujourd'hui n'est pas seulement un moteur stratégique pour améliorer l'efficacité des gouvernements et du secteur public dans chacun des gouvernements de pays du monde arabe, mais la technologie, elle peut également être un soutien pour l'efficacité des différentes politiques et créer des gouvernements plus ouverts, plus transparents, plus innovants et assurer la participation du citoyen dans la conception des politiques publiques et finalement, ces gouvernements pourraient être dignes de confiance. En fait, un changement fondamental devrait peut-être imposer par rapport aux approches qui sont en train d'être centrées sur le citoyen. Aujourd'hui, tout gouvernement, il anticipe les besoins du citoyen, il exprime les besoins des citoyens et des entreprises à leur place. Ces approches-là devront être changées vers des approches axées sur le citoyen, axées sur les entreprises, où le citoyen et l'entreprise elle-même pourraient formuler et déterminer leurs besoins en partenariat avec les gouvernements. Mais comme vous le savez, la multiplication des options technologiques pourrait engendrer de nouveaux risques et des attentes sociétales accrues auxquelles les gouvernements ne sont pas toujours pleinement préparés à répondre à ces contraintes. C'est pour ça que toute stratégie gouvernementale, tout gouvernement devrait mettre en place sa stratégie digitale et cette stratégie devrait se faire autour de pratiquement les trois axes suivants. Premièrement, toute stratégie digitale devrait assurer l'inclusion sociale, numérique et financière, ou digitale et financière du citoyen, où l'objectif majeur, c'est de réduire cette fracture sociale et garantir une plus grande équité citoyenne. Un autre objectif de l'inclusion sociale, c'est de garantir un accès équitable à tout le monde, un accès équitable au digital, même pour les personnes vulnérables, même pour les personnes illettrées. Cette stratégie-là devrait garantir un accès équitable au digital à travers des moyens, des terminaux, des outils, des applications mobile ou web. Et aussi, toute stratégie devrait assurer de desservir ou de bien desservir toutes les régions du pays par une infrastructure de très haut débit qui peut être le socle de base où on pourra développer les services digitaux orientés vers le citoyen. Et finalement, le dernier objectif de cette inclusion sociale ou inclusion numérique et financière, c'est comment améliorer et diversifier les services de paiement électronique. Et vous savez que l'inclusion financière du citoyen ne pourra se faire qu'à travers la diversification et l'amélioration des services de paiement en utilisant le digital. Le deuxième axe qui devrait être parmi les axes de la stratégie digitale de chaque gouvernement, c'est la transformation digitale des services publics. Et là, tout ça ne pourra se faire qu'à travers une identité digitale ou une identité numérique du citoyen pourrait permettre aux citoyens d'assurer une participation aux différents services publics en garantissant une transparence totale pour l'accès ou pour l'utilisation de ces services-là. Cette transformation digitale devrait aussi assurer la modernisation de l'administration à travers la diversification des différents services G2G, government to government, G2E, government to employee, G2B, government to business et G2C, government to citizen. L'un des facteurs majeurs de cette transformation digitale, c'est comment assurer une administration paperless, comment assurer une administration sans papier avec les moindres délais. Et tout ça ne pourra se faire qu'à travers une révision du cadre juridique institutionnel du mode de régulation afin de moderniser et compléter la législation en vigueur, la législation actuelle, et essayer de mettre des nouvelles initiatives ou de canaliser de nouvelles initiatives et formes de développement technologique dans l'objectif de mettre en place un nouveau cadre institutionnel pour une meilleure régulation du secteur. Donc actuellement, tout gouvernement, je crois qu'il devrait se préparer pour la période post-Covid Vous savez que le Covid était le meilleur accélérateur de la transformation digitale et cette période-là, post-Covid, va être caractérisée essentiellement par une forte demande de la bande passante. Je crois qu'on devrait mettre en place une stratégie en urgence pour la période post-Covid parce qu'on aura une forte demande de la bande passante et là, un aspect critique va s'imposer lié essentiellement à la sécurité et à la cybersécurité. Je crois que je dois m'arrêter là et je resterai à votre disposition pour répondre à vos questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawki, and again, very important messages, and thank you for sharing with us a governmental perspective, how technologies are considered support and makes the government trustworthy, and the need to be citizen-centric and business-centric at the same time, and challenges that the governments meet, also how we can develop the importance of e-payment statements and the effect of COVID on accelerating the digital transformation. Thank you very much. And having listened to a government perspective and a private sector perspective, I would like to turn next to Mr. Mohammed Higazi, Senior Advisor for Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Muharram and Partners for Strategic Communications and Government Affairs in Egypt. Mr. Mohammed is a senior legal counsel with over 20 years experience in intellectual property, communications and information technology markets, regulations and development, as well as in legislations, laws and regulatory frameworks in relation to cybercrime, privacy and data protection, e-signature, digital evidences, and telecom and media. Mr. Mohammed, you have a very broad experience, but we would like to hear from you first about cloud computing policies and also challenges in relation to legal and regulatory frameworks that deal with personal data. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Manel. And allow me to speak in Arabic, please. الحقيقة سعيد جدا ان انا اكون مع حضراتكم النهارده علشان نتكلم على الجزء المتعلق بالاطار التنظيمي والتشريعي للكلاود كومبيوتنج او للحوسبة السحابية. ويمكن اتضح الحقيقة في خلال الأعوام القليلة اللي فاتت أهمية الكلاود، خصوصا في ظل جائحة كوفيد 19 الحقيقة، وإزاي إنها يعني سمحت باستمرارية الأعمال في الفترة اللي كان فيها لوك داون أو يعني إغلاق كلي في بعض الدول وإغلاق جزئي في دول كبيرة جدا. ولأي مدى الحقيقة الحكومات قدرت إنها تعتمد عليها بشكل أساسي في تقديم الخدمات الحكومية، وخصوصا كمان على مستوى الخدمات المرتبطة بالتعليم والصحة وخلافه. طبعا مفيش شك في إنه يعني الكلاود الحقيقة ليها مجموعة كبيرة من الفوائد، أهمها الحقيقة هي خفض التكلفة والميزانيات المتعلقة بالجهات الحكومية بشكل أساسي، والجهات الخاصة كمان فيما يتعلق بالإنفاق على البنية الأساسية لتكنولوجيا المعلومات وإنشاء يعني داتا سنترز أو يعني أجهزة ومعدات وشبكات متعلقة بالاستثمار في الموارد المعلوماتية بشكل أساسي. بالإضافة لكده كمان دورها في تخفيض النفقات التشغيلية فيما يتعلق ب يعني نظم المعلومات اللي داخل الجهات الحكومية، وتقليل عدد الموظفين الفنيين اللي هم اوريدي عندنا فيهم شورتج الحقيقة كبير ونقص في الكوادر البشرية المدربة بشكل أساسي. مش بس كده، إنما كمان يعني إمكانية إنه نقدر إننا ندفع المقابل الخاص بتقديم هذه الخدمات بشكل يعني بسيط جدا ومحدد عند الطلب، وبالتالي هقدر اني اوسع او اضيق في مستوى الخدمات والانفاق الخاص بيا. يمكن واحنا بنتكلم على فكرة الكلاود دايما عندنا بعض المشاكل التنظيمية والقانونية في المسألة دي، ودي راجعة الحقيقة للإيكو سيستم بشكل أساسي. يمكن الأساتذة اللي سبقوني في الحديث الحقيقة اتكلموا على نماذج الأعمال الجديدة، اتكلموا على فكرة أنه تكنولوجيا المعلومات الحقيقة خلقت حالة من الحالات المهمة جدا لإزاي أقدر أني أطور من نماذج الأعمال المختلفة. إنما التشريعات الحقيقة والأطر التنظيمية ما زالت يعني شوية مش متواكبة مع التطور التشريعي اللي موجود. مهم جدا الحقيقة إننا يبقى عندنا كلاود فيرست بوليسي موجودة عشان نقدر إننا نشجع على استخدامات الحوسبة السحابية بشكل أساسي. ده طبعا هيجرنا على طول لسياسات تنظيمية مرتبطة بتصنيف البيانات، ودي نقطة الحقيقة من النقط المهمة جدا إننا نبقى يعني بنشتغل عليها. إزاي أقدر إني أصنف البيانات اللي موجودة داخل القطاعات الحكومية وداخل المؤسسات بشكل أساسي علشان نقدر إننا نطلع للخدمات الحوسبية بشكل أساسي. ده الحقيقة جزء أساسي من المسألة. محتاجين كمان إننا يعني نبص على فكرة نقل البيانات عبر الحدود، ونحاول إننا ننشئ آليات مشتركة وفيها نوع من أنواع التناغم والتجانس الحقيقة ما بين الدول بعضها وبعض وهي بتتكلم على نقل البيانات عبر الحدود. وبالتأكيد أنه دوت هيجرنا كمان للحديث عن الأطر التنظيمية المرتبطة بفكرة الداتا لوكاليزيشن أو توطين البيانات، اللي الحقيقة أنه برغم أنه في وجود لوجاهة معينة في المسألة دي، إنما بالتأكيد أنه كمان ليها تبعات أخرى على الصعيد الاقتصادي بشكل كبير جدا. يمكن في مصر كان ليا الشرف الحقيقة أني أشتغل على يعني قوانين مكافحة جرائم تقنية المعلومات وحماية البيانات الشخصية. حاولنا بقدر المستطاع أنها تبقى متواكبة مع الممارسات الدولية، ودي الحقيقة نقطة من النقط المهمة جدا أننا نبقى بنتكلم على إطار قانوني وتنظيمي متوافق مع باقي الممارسات الدولية اللي موجودة في نفس القطاع أو في نفس المجال اللي احنا بنتكلم عليه، علشان نسمح الحقيقة بشكل أساسي لعمليات الاستثمار ومشاركة القطاع الخاص. طبعا جزء كمان مهم الحقيقة واحنا بنتكلم على فكرة الكلاود، إننا مش بس نبص على سياسات تصنيف البيانات ومسائل البرايفسي والسكيورتي، إنما كمان مهم جدا إننا نبص على القوانين المرتبطة بالشراء والتعاقدات الحكومية. مهم جدا إننا يبقى قوانين الشراء الحكومي وعمليات التعاقد الحكومي فيما يتعلق بخدمات الحوسبة السحابية بتتيح الكلام ده بشكل أساسي للقطاع الحكومي وللقطاع الخاص إنه يساهم في المسألة دي. نقطة تانية الحقيقة كمان مهمة، فكرة آليات فرض الضرائب على الشركات مقدمة خدمات الحوسبة السحابية ومدى اتفاقها الحقيقة مع الأطر التنظيمية والقانونية المختلفة. أنا يعني هقف هنا منال، ولو في أي أسئلة تحت أمرك. شكرا.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad, and again, interesting remarks on importance of cloud computing and its positive effect during the COVID situation, and how it helped everyone to continue functioning during the lockdowns, and also in particular in respect to health and education, and also important topic on data categorization, and thanks for the examples from Egypt. I would like to move now to an expert from the technical community, Mr. Shafiq Chaya, Market Communications Manager at Tribe NCC in United Arab Emirates. Mr. Shafiq has over 22 years of experience in internet and telecom industry. He joined RIPE NCC as Regional Communications Manager for the Middle East, supporting different stakeholders with capacity development and expertise related to internet infrastructure and governance, but also manages public policies and government affairs, supporting governments, regulators, and policymakers on issues related to internet connectivity and access. Mr. Shafiq, more than half the world is now connected online, but still around 3 billion are not connected. And we've been hearing that to connect the unconnected, achieve meaningful and universal connectivity, and realize the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we need collaborative regulatory approaches. So what would a new generation of such policies and collaborative regulations look like?
Thank you, Manal. Good morning, good afternoon. First, it's a great pleasure to be with you today, and I'm glad to see so many old friends and colleagues. I will start by that I'm really pleased to hear our esteemed speakers, my colleagues on the panel, Mr. Hafnawi and Mr. Shihi, who are governments and regulatory representatives, talking about interesting things like collaboration, lack of adaptive regulation, regulations don't meet anymore the new technology, and to ensure citizen protection while make space for technology advancement, and so on and so on. So these are really valid points, and I really fully agree, especially coming from governments. These are some of the challenges emerged during the global pandemic to mitigate COVID-19 impacts, where certainly regulations failed to support the new technology. This sudden migration due to lockdown and social distancing, we know that this pushed a lot of governments in the region and elsewhere in taking quick regulatory actions to ensure, as I mentioned, citizens' protection, and the economy is running up. So what's the situation today that we have? In the wake of this development, so now regulators and governments are facing the following challenge: how they can implement regulations to protect their citizens and to protect their national infrastructure, while at the same time keeping people and allowing innovation and new technology to flourish. I give a small example. During the pandemic, several countries immediately relaxed restrictions, for example, over voice over IPs, and they lifted the bans on Skype and Google Meet. They lifted the ban on video conferencing platform, which is used widely in e-learning and in e-commerce. So after all, I believe it's not a secret that the current regulatory approach failed to support the new technology. Traditional regulations are outdated and not relevant anymore to technology advancement. I go back to what Dr. Hijaz has mentioned too about the cloud computing and digitization. It's really expands rapidly. And to meet this digital demand, regulators, business, and technology providers should benefit from the collaborative and the cross-sectional approach to put and draft regulations and policies. And this draws on the knowledge of each stakeholder. Putting all these experts around one table can give us a good result. This approach, I believe, is the best and the quickest way to deliver inclusive connectivity, digital products, and services to the greatest number of people. I will end my introductory remarks on good news. The news that there has been a lot of progress over the past 2 years in the region, where many regulators started to evaluate and even to engage in these collaborative and adaptive approaches to policies and regulation. Certainly, some countries are slower than others, and this is due to different reasons, but I believe we are on the right track. Thank you for you, Manar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shafiq, and thank you for blending everything we have heard earlier and highlighting how regulations are lacking to support new technologies and how governments had to take quick actions, quick regulatory actions during the pandemic, and highlighting that traditional regulations are outdated and the challenge for governments to protect their citizens while allowing innovation to flourish. And good to know we're on the right track and that there is progress in the region. So thank you for the good news. And now I would like to introduce and give the floor to Mr. Sherbil Shbeir, attorney and consultant in cybersecurity at Beirut Bar Association in Lebanon. Mr. Sherbil is a lawyer, a member of the Beirut Bar Association and its Artificial Intelligence Committee, former member of the Beirut Parliament Special Committee for E-Transaction Law, expert on ICT and cyber criminality issues, and managing partner at Attorneys Law Firm. He is also member of the Governance Committee of ISOC Lebanese chapter and member of the Lebanese IGF MAG. Mr. Sherbil, drawing on your experience with the e-transaction law in Lebanon, how do you see data protection regulations and their extraterritorial effect? Again, you're free to speak English, Arabic, or French. The floor is yours.
بونجور، أول شيء يعطيكم العافية جميعا. رح بلش بالأنجلي، ارجع انتقل للمين كويشن بالعربي لأنه اللغة هي بالعربي تبع العرب IGF. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and secondly, I would like to express my gratitude and utmost satisfaction for the time and effort put by the organization team, Manar, Rita, and everyone, rendering this event to be successful as it is. As per my point of view, from legal and technical perspective, no doubt that cloud, security, and digital transformation, AI, blockchain, IoT are the future. They provide a clear roadmap for achieving our high ambitions with smart cities and e-government, and improve the quality of life for the Middle East citizen, resident, and investor, and entrepreneur, etc. New services can be launched in hours rather than months and years. This will improve the economical status of the Middle East. However, and on the other hand, this will create big challenges from the legal perspective. I will state some of them. Competent and applicable law. When we talk about data, this is really very challenging. Jurisdiction and sovereignty, obligations and responsibility. This would not only affect one law or specific legal provision, but also different laws in different countries. Now, I will like briefly to give you our experience in Lebanon. We was adopting technology as a neutral laws, which would allow evolvement through ministerial decrees or memos. This is less of burden in the legal framework as does not rely on parliament interference. To give an example, Law 81 is the law that I was drafting and I work on it, is the e-transaction law, covered cybercrimes, data protection, e-commerce, e-signature, e-banking, was first drafted in 2002, and discussions went through around 2 decades to get the law issued, while technology has evolved and changed considerably between 2002 and 2018. This is what was our colleague was mentioning. This would not only affect one law or specific legal provision, but also different laws which do not take into consideration the virtual sphere, but rather focus on the physical sphere. Prior to starting large-scale digital transformation project, legal workout must be held to simplify procedure. This is the main issue, is to simplify the procedure and digitalize the new procedures. What I mean is to set a framework law, flexible law, where we can adjust and implement technical rules and regulations. The regulatory framework would take into account the different laws adopted in countries with which Lebanon has significant commercial and transactional relationship, as well as laws with regional and international impact as GDPR. هذه كانت الانترودكشن بالنسبة لما يتعلق بالدخول إلى موضوع data protection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charbel, and thank you for again highlighting the different aspects of digital transformation and highlighting the different technologies we have at hand, the IoT, blockchain, and how they are forming or shaping our future, improving the economical status, but at the same time imposing challenges on the region. We lack competent laws, and also the issue of digital sovereignty. And thank you very much for giving the illustrative example from Lebanon regarding the e-transaction law and how the discussions took so long and technology did a great leap meanwhile.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
This is the reason why we must do a framework law.
Indeed. So thank you all for the insightful introductory remarks. I would like now to start the discussion among the panelists before opening the floor for Q&A. So to our attendees, please start getting ready with any questions you may have. And meanwhile, following the same order, I will start by you, Mr. Bilal, if I may, and ask you, how can we achieve greater international consistency in adopted proposed regulations, and what are the obstacles that hinder joint collaborative approaches?
Thank you, Manal. Again, back to say that technology has no borders. So in order to have international consistency in adopted and the proposed regulations, we have to be sure that we have agreed regulations and cooperative regulations between different countries. Here, we're not talking only on the country level, on the governments only. It is also between governments and the private sectors in different countries. So, for example, we have data now is passing borders without passports. So data is moving through borders. We need to be sure that we are protecting the data. We are having new business models, and these business models are protected. In order to move to cloud, for example, we will have all our data maybe in international hosting, not in local. And we have our data exposed to some data centers. So we need to be sure that data is being protected in the proper way. And we need to be sure that the rules are being agreed between the countries and the companies. I don't need to mention names for the host companies. For example, X company that it's hosting data in one country, they need to have agreed regulations and agreed rules for work in that country. So without these rules, there will be a conflict happening soon, and the data will be in trouble. So it is touching the national security, touching the business rules, touching the business utilization in that country. So we need to be sure that in the digital race, that country putting himself in the proper place. There is a useful report by Arthur D. Little. It was published in October this year. It talks about attracting foreign direct investment in cultivating digital economy, which talks about strategic policies enabling a nation's unique core strengths and values. These values are fundamental for the investment. When they say about foreign digital investment, they are saying we need to protect the investment and we need to have a proper competition that allows countries to announce different services and to have policymakers think in a strategic way to match that demand. So we need to be sure that in order to have proper investment and the proper dealing between different countries to support digital development in digital economy, we need to have that different countries can be classified based on their digital economy architecture types that help policymakers to shape their strategic focus. And we need to be sure that nations target investment policies, incentives, in domains aligned with digital strength of that country. And we need to be sure to utilize the resources and the microeconomic stability of the country and to get rid of regulatory bottlenecks. This is related directly to the investment policies, incentives, and investor pitches that can work together with the governments. So human capital, business ecosystem, and technological capabilities are very important to have foreign digital investment ready. So here, when we say about what are the benefits or how can we have joint approaches, for example, in Europe, they mentioned that now we don't have a static regulatory or telecom regulatory that thinks about technology only. We need to boost investment. We need to have collaborative regulatory between different sectors. And we need to be sure that market is more coherent, more integrated, and more efficient. And we need to reduce the investment risks and to have higher investor rewards. Here, if there is no cooperation between the countries or between different sectors and between companies and countries, there will be an issue in investment. For example, some countries will ban some platforms from that country because there is no proper agreement between the country and that platform provider. Some Far East markets are prohibiting some platforms. Some West markets are prohibiting East countries' platforms. We don't need to get market failure. We need to have proper trade. We need to get rid of barriers. We need to promote the business environment, excellent business environment. We need to support collaboration between different sectors. So proper regulatory regulations, proper policies will enhance the investment and will reduce the risk. We don't think about only data or technology. We need to think about business continuity, because when you invest in a country in digital economy, it is a long-term investment. So you need to be sure that your business is sustainable, your business is protected, and at the same time, you don't need to get sudden rules or sudden policies that it will prohibit you from doing your business in the proper way. So we need to think about the private sector's partner, not only a traditional worker who can come and leave at any time. So we need to think about long-term partnership. We need to think about collaboration, and we need to think about protection. And at the same time, it should be a win-win case between the investor, between the countries. And so it will encourage the international investment, not only local investment. So when you have rules ready, you will have investment from operators or from companies in different countries at your country, or you will be like a factory for that company, or you'll be like a kitchen for that company in your country. So there are different business models that can work in this model. Sorry for being late.
It's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bilal. And I would like to bring to your attention a question from the floor, and meanwhile, as you read it in the Q&A pod, I would like to move next to Mr. Shawki Shihi. Mr. Shawki, to what extent are Arab governments able and prepared to set appropriate policies and regulatory frameworks to keep pace with the new digital trends? And how can Arab telecom regulators balance putting in place policies to protect networks and citizens while keeping people connected and allowing digital innovation to flourish? And I hope we can make this iteration shorter and quicker so that we can make up for the time. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, منال. أعتقد أنه الحكومات العربية هي قادرة على وضع السياسات والأطر القانونية الضرورية لمتابعة ولا لمتابعة النسق تطور الديجيتال على مستوى العالم. السؤال هو هل الحكومات حاضرة الآن لوضع السياسات على أرض الواقع؟ أعتقد أنه لكي تكون الحكومة والحكومات العربية قادرة أو حاضرة على تنفيذ السياسات والأطر القانونية الضرورية للقطاع الديجيتال، لن يتم إلا عبر وضع استراتيجية لتقوية أو لتطوير الكفاءات الموجودة على مستوى القطاع العام أو حتى على مستوى القطاع الخاص، وخاصة في كذلك في وضع وظيفة الفي تكنولوجيك أو وظيفة تطوير وظيفة البحث العلمي على مستوى القطاع الديجيتال. أظن أنه في مرحلة أولى على مستوى تطوير الكفاءات الدول العربية، وخاصة أذكر بالخصوص تونس كفاءاتها هم موجودون على مستوى كبرى الشركات العالمية وهم مطلوبون بكثافة على مستوى كبرى الشركات العملاقة في ميدان التكنولوجيا. والحكومات لم تستطع، والحكومة التونسية والحكومات المتعاقبة على تونس لم تستطع المحافظة على هذه الكفاءات، وبالتالي يمكن القول أنه يمكن الاعتماد على هذه الكفاءات من أجل تطوير وظيفة البحث العلمي أو وظيفة الفي تكنولوجيك كما نسميها بالفرنسية، والأهمية البحث العلمي في الميدان هذايا. واعتقد انه في نفس المجال من الضروري ان يتم تطوير مستوى التعاون بين الدول العربية، لأنه التعاون في هذا المجال ينجم يكون هو قادر أنه يكون ان اكسيليراتور أو مسرع لتنفيذ هذه السياسات على مستوى الدول العربية. بالنسبة للسؤال المتعلق بهل أنه الريجولاتورز أو les régulateurs du secteur de télécommunications puissants, comment ils peuvent équilibrer la mise en place des politiques publiques. أعتقد أنه les régulateurs pourraient assurer cet équilibre à travers le développement des solutions d'aide à la décision من خلال وضع مرصد للقطاع الرقمي الذي يمكن أن يمكن أصحاب القرار على مستوى الحكومات من توجيه مستوى الاستثمارات لقطاع في مجالات معينة، خاصة وأنه هل المرصد هذا قادر أن يوفر المعلومة الحينية وينجم يضمن تطور القطاع التكنولوجيا من خلال لا ديفيزيون دي معناتها من خلال وضع على الذمه مستوى جداول قياده او ديتا برود بار بما يمكن اصحاب القرار من اخذ القرار في الوقت المناسب وتوجيه او تعديل مستوى الانفستمنت معناتها مستوى الاستثمار في المجال هذا.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawki. And now moving next to Mr. Muhammad Higazi. And please, Muhammad, how can regulations be an enabler rather than an inhibitor? And what are the prospects for international cooperation to develop joint policies? Please, the floor is yours. And let's keep it short. We're trying to make up for the time. I'm sorry to rush everyone.
تمام. طيب يعني يمكن منال اتقال من الزملاء الحقيقة فكرة أهمية جذب الاستثمارات الأجنبية داخل الدول، ودي نقطة الحقيقة من النقط اللي معظم الدول الحقيقة في منطقتنا بتحاول إنها تشتغل عليها. علشان ده يحصل الحقيقة محتاجين إنه السياسات التشريعية والأطر التنظيمية تبقى بتتسم بالكفاءة والفاعلية والشفافية، وبتعزز الحقيقة مبادئ الحوكمة وسيادة القانون. ده الحقيقة مش هيحصل إلا بمحاولة إشراك القطاع الخاص في عمليات البابليك كونسلتيشن أو الإسهام في وضع رؤيته داخل التشريعات والأطر التنظيمية اللي المفروض أنها بتعكس نماذج الأعمال الجديدة، سواء كانت على مستوى الحوسبة السحابية أو البلوك تشين أو الاي اي أو خلافه. دي الحقيقة مسألة من المسائل المهمة جدا، وإحنا بنتكلم على إزاي نقدر نعمل عملية المقاربة دي. الفكرة الأخرى الحقيقة فكرة متعلقة بالساند بوكس، أو إني بخلق آلية لتجربة وتهيئة المناخ للأطر التنظيمية، ونحاول إننا نجربها في بيئة مشابهة لبيئة الأعمال ونشوف النتائج بتاعتها، وبعدين نبتدي إننا نشتغل عليها. دي برضو واحدة من الأساليب اللي من الممكن إنها تبقى موجودة. يمكن كمان مهم جدا إننا وإحنا بنتكلم على إزاي نخلق آليات للتعاون المشترك نحاول إننا نوصل على الأقل في مسائل السايبر سيكيورتي والداتا بروتكشن لمعايير ومقاييس موحدة، وليكن مثلا الايزو ستاندر أو أي معايير قياسية من الممكن إنه يبقى هناك توافق عليها كبيز لاين تبتدي الدول تشتغل من خلالها. بالتأكيد أنه لو قدرنا كمجتمع دولي أو على الأقل في المنطقة العربية إننا يعني نحاول نبني رأي عام عالمي على اتفاقية دولية لحد أدنى من المعايير المتعلقة بالداتا بروتكشن وبالسايبر سيكيورتي، أعتقد أن ده قد يكون واحد من الحلول المهمة وإحنا بنتكلم. أنا مش هطول عشان الوقت، أنا عارف أن أنت يعني الوقت بيدهمنا. أشكرك.
Thank you very much, and sorry to keep interrupting, but I would like to move next to Mr. Shafiq. And how can we overcome stakeholders and government silos, and how does RIPE NCC engage with the different stakeholder groups? And if you were able also to touch on Faisal by Yuli's question in the chat would be great. Thank you. In the Q&A pod, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Manal. Sure, I'm happy to answer Faisal's questions that he wrote in the chat about the collaboration between the different stakeholders. But before that, let me reply your question, Manal. We know that reviewing new or existing regulations is not an easy task. An example of what Mr. Sharbil said previously. While the regulators are challenged by the complexity of digitization the digital transformation, they need to balance between drafting and implementing new regulations, and keep in mind that this regulation can have direct or indirect impact on other industry and sectors. And another critical factor here is that we should not forget that drafting a regulation could take several years. Once again, example what Mr. Charbel said, whereas big tech companies and startups can develop their products and services within a day or a week or months. So it's really, the changes are developing very, very quickly. Back to your question on if the existing old regulatory approaches and tools remain appropriate, the answer is yes and no. It depends on the topic. But here, once again, I echo Mr. Charbel. I'm very far from law, but what I hear today was really interesting. We need to think and explore new tools and approaches to promote what he said, framework law, to diffuse new technology, data privacy, competition, entrepreneurship, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I appraise your effort, Mr. Charbel, in this area. Very quickly, I will reply to Faisal's question, how to collaborate. The magic formula is a multi-stakeholder approach, which with its inclusiveness, it develop the best place that the best policy that responds to the need of citizens, and at the same time, it meet the demand of this changing environment. Here, there's a very important note that I want to share with you is that the most powerful actors or stakeholders in this approach are governments and private businesses. And I believe that they are responsible to ensure that other stakeholders, such as civil society, can meaningfully contribute to these discussions. And a good example, what's happening today, we are here under one platform, on one Zoom platform. The dialogue today is initiated by United Nations agencies. We have governments, we have technical community, and we have private. So there are different approaches, and one of the other approaches that comes in my mind now is that the consultative multi-stakeholder meetings, or the public consultations, or even the regional collaborations between regulators themselves. So this is what I have in my mind now, and I hope that I answered your question, Faisal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shafiq. I'm moving next to Mr. Charbel. And Mr. Charbel, looking ahead, do you see data regulations an aid or an obstacle? And how do you see a situation where different countries adopt different data protection regulations? And I would ask all other speakers to think of one or two key words or key messages for our last round on action items. Mr. Charbel, please go ahead.
رح جاوب هذا الموضوع بالعربي. لابد انه لاقدر جاوب على هيك نقطة لازم نعطي نبذة تاريخية سريعة عن الداتا بروتكشن بالعالم. على السريع بال 1970 صار في عدة مشاكل بموضوع ما يتعلق بالتعسف باستعمال المعلومات. بكبك فرنسا واوروبا الشمالية كان اول ناس بلشوا يفكروا يحطوا قوانين بهذا الموضوع. فرنسا سنة 78 حطت الوضع الانفورماتيك، طورته بال 95 بشيء اسمه ديريكتيف اوروبيان دو 95، ورجع بال 2004 عملت قانون بيتعلق بالداتا بروتكشن، واخر شيء صار عندنا شيء اسمه GDPR. تنقدر نحن نحكي عن موضوع حماية البيانات وما يتعلق بعائق قدام تطور مثل ما الكل حكي هو مزبوط. لما نحكي نحن عن داتا بروتكشن عم نفوت بعدة محلات، خصوصا لما نحكي عن كلاود كومبيوتينج مثل ما الزملاء حكيوا فيها، وديجيتال ترانسفورميشن، لنقدر نحن نعمل قانون يقدر يغطي كل هالمواضيع. يعني قانون عام يكون يقدر يمزج ما بين حماية الأشخاص وحماية بياناتهم، أن يمس بحرياتهم. لانه لما نحكي نحن بداتا بروتكشن دائما بندق بحريات العالم. ولما نقول داتا لازم نعرف شو يعني داتا، كلاسيفيكيشنز تبع الداتا. في كثير ناس هون في خلاف كثير كبير. عندنا تو كايند اوف داتا، عندنا بيرسونال داتا يلي هي كثير مهمه، فيها سنسيتيف داتا اللي بتتعلق من البصمه للاسم لاي شيء بيتعلق بالانسان. هيدا الشيء نعتبره نحن بيرسونال داتا، يلي هلا مؤخرا صار بلش كل الدول تعرف انه في اهميه لهذا الموضوع، وصولا لشيء نحن سميناه هو الجي دي بي ار، يلي هن بيعتبروه جولدن ستاندرد بكل يوروب، سموه جولدن ستاندرد. وهذا الشيء كثير مهم، لانه لما نتعاطى مع موضوع جي دي بي ار عنده بوفوار اكسترا تيريتوريال. يعني لما صار في مشاكل بين يوروب وامريكا كان في شيء عندنا اسمه يو اس اي شيلد، اللي هو الدرع تين، انه ما حدا بيتخطى معلومات الثانيه. وصار في خلافات من بعدها، مشينا طبقنا القانون الجي دي بي ار يلي هو عنده هالبوفوار ما وراء الحدود. لما نقول ما وراء الحدود يعني بيقدر كل ريزيدان او كل شخص اوروبي عايش باوروبا عم بيتعاطى مع اي شركه براتها ملزم بحمايه البيانات لها، واهم ما تطرق له هذا القانون وهو دروا الو بي، يعني حق النسيان. يعني انا اذا شيء لحظه من اللحظات قدرت انا احط داتا وبدي امحيها بقدر امحيها. واكثر من هذا الشيء جبروا بهذا القانون في شيء اسمه دي بي او، يعني داتا بروتكشن اوفيسر، يعني مجبور كل شخص عنده شركه من اس ام ايز كل ما هنالك يكون عنده شخص مولش بحمايه هالبيانات والانتباه لها، وفي حال صار في خرق لها نعلم نحن الجهه الاخرى او الشخص اللي هو عم يستفيد منها. انا عم جرب سرع قد ما فيي لانه هذا الموضوع كثير كبير وبناء لطلب حضرتك. اذا في اي من سؤال بقدر كمان انا ضوي عليه وجاوب عليه كمان، انا ريدي له.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
جربت اختصر بسرعه.
Yeah, much appreciated. And again, sorry, we're trying to make up for the time. And now I would like to, what would be your final words or action items or takeaways that you would like to leave the audience with in tweet messages, concise, sharp, and clear? Mr. Bilal, please.
Thank you, Mahad. As a final message that I would like to say that international best practice shows that the clear vision and the strategy is the key for the investment and for the successful regulations. And we need to accelerate infrastructure rollout, so we need to have a quick development. New policies and regulatory frameworks are the rules to have this business, and we need to have collaborative regulation.
Thank you. Oops.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bilal. Mr. Shawki, please.
Thank you very much. I will end my intervention in English. Just two key messages, I think, of course, from my point of view that we have to retain. First of all, I think all the government will have to prepare the post-COVID recovery because of the huge demand for the internet bandwidth. And the second, the whole world, and I think especially the Arab world, must collaborate to guarantee equitable and safe internet access in order to reach the United Nations SDGs. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawki. Over to you, Mr. Muhammad, please. Mr. Muhammad, any final words or?
طيب الحقيقة طبعا يعني الفكرة المتعلقة بالبست براكتسز ومحاولة اتباعها ده جزء الحقيقة من الأجزاء المهمة جدا، إنما في جزء تاني الحقيقة يمكن من الخبرة في السنين اللي فاتت كنا بنشوفها، إنه الريجوليتورز الحقيقة سبيشالي القانونيين ورجال البرلمان دايما بيبقى عندهم إشكالية في تفهم النواحي التكنولوجية المختلفة والتكنولوجيات المختلفة. والحقيقة مهم جدا إننا نبقى بنحاول إننا نفهمهم أو نشرح لهم الأبعاد التكنولوجية والآثار الخاصة بيها بشكل كبير جدا، علشان يقدروا كمان إنهم يساعدوا في صياغة أطر تنظيمية وتشريعية وقانونية سليمة. أنا مش هطول أكتر.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shafiq, please.
Okay, I have 3 quick messages. First one, we need to build a culture of trust, collaboration, and understanding, then push problems on each other and look for somebody to blame. My second message, governments and regulators bring a massive value to the internet community by helping us investigating and understanding their markets. Sharing this information with the community helps create a kind of dialogue, and we can analyze and find the best way forward. And the third message, regulations need to support technology and protect data privacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shafi. Sharp and clear. Mr. Charbel, please.
رح اقول شغلتين. اول شيء بالنسبه لموضوع governments بدي اقولها بالانجليزي. Governments should beware not to transform this solution, any solution, into a police state. Protection of the state sovereignty cannot be an excuse to allow government to use extensively personal data or restrict certain liberal behaviors in parallel with the adoption of legal provisions ensuring data sovereignty. Protection policymakers and industry players should ensure that personal data is protected from any abusive and intrusive policy or law. في شغله كلمه نحن لما كتبنا القانون الاي ترانزاكشن لو نحطت بالبريامبول بمقدمته، هي بالفرنسي بس رح اقولها لانه اللي يساعدنا فيها هن فرنسا اذا في اقولها. هي كثير مهمه الرساله. La révolution numérique ne se réduit pas à une somme d'inventions scientifiques et d'innovations technologiques. Elle est aussi une révolution culturelle, génératrice d'une société universelle de l'information. Ce phénomène mondial, qui permet à tout individu de communiquer à tout instant avec autrui, concerne chacun dans sa personne et dans ses biens. La révolution numérique affecte ainsi l'ensemble des rapports sociaux, ces rapports que le droit a pour mission d'organiser et de réguler. Il est évident que le droit doit s'adapter à ces nouveaux paramètres de la vie sociale. Présenté avant-projet de loi sur la communication, l'écriture et transactions électroniques, professeur Pierre Catala. هي الرسالة اللي كنت بقولها. في أسئلة بقلب الشات إذا بدكم نجاوب عليها.
Thank you very much, Charbel, and apologies for not being able to take the question in the chat. I do apologize for the late start and for the late ending, but we need to conclude, and the best way to protect the future is to create it. So let's work together to create the future we wish for. I would like to thank all the organizers, all the speakers and the attendants, and thank you all for your participation. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good rest of your days. Thank you.
Merci لكم. يعطيكم الف عافية.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Under the slogan of shaping our digital future, the Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, the CDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, Let's shape our digital future.